The city had died long ago. Its tall buildings were broken like old bones, and the air smelled of smoke and dust. Every sound echoed. The crunch of glass, the distant hum of a dying power line. Eli, a lonely human scavenger, moved carefully through the ruins with a small flashlight and a backpack. He had been walking since sunrise, searching for anything that could help him survive one more night. Food, clean water, a working battery, anything. He was tired, his boots were torn, and his coat was old and thin against the cold wind. He had been alone for months since the war ended, or maybe it never really ended. There were no cities left, only silence and memories. The humans had lost everything, and the aliens had vanished into the skies, but sometimes, rumors said, one or two alien survivors still wandered these broken places, hiding, starving, afraid of what humans might do to them. As Eli stepped into what used to be a market, he saw movement in the shadows. He stopped, listening. Something small, a sound like metal shifting or someone breathing fast. He turned his flashlight slowly toward the noise, and there, under a broken stall, he saw her. She was small, maybe 16 or 17, with pale blue skin and silver hair tangled with dirt. Her big eyes glowed faintly in the dark, reflecting fear and hunger. Her clothes were torn, and her thin hands clutched a sharp piece of glass, ready to defend herself. When Eli took a step closer, she flinched and hissed softly. Her language was strange, but fear sounded the same in every world. He raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand. She didn't move, her whole body shaking. She believed he was going to hurt her, or worse, eat her. That was what her kind had been told about humans, that they were monsters who burned planets and devoured anything weaker. Eli looked at her for a long moment, feeling something heavy inside his chest. He saw not an enemy, but a child, scared and lost. He opened his bag and took out a small piece of dry bread, the last he had. He placed it on the ground and slowly backed away. The girl watched him like a wild animal. Confused, her stomach growled, but she didn't move. Eli sat down a few steps away, pretending not to care. He looked at the cracked sky through the broken roof and whispered to himself, "Take it, kid." Minutes passed. Finally, she crawled forward, still watching him, and snatched the bread. She ate fast. Afraid it might disappear, crumbs fell from her lips. And for a second, Eli almost smiled when she finished. She licked her fingers and stared at him again. Her eyes softened a little. "Not much, but enough," Eli pointed to himself. "Eli," he said, tapping his chest. She didn't answer. He pointed at her. "You?" She looked confused, then whispered something. A soft word. "Trembling, Lura," she said, her voice almost a breath. Eli nodded slowly. "Lura," he repeated, and she blinked in surprise. A cold wind passed through the ruins. She shivered, wrapping her thin arms around herself. Eli watched quietly, then reached into his backpack. He took out his old blanket, rough and worn. With holes along the edges, it was his only one. The only thing that kept him alive during nights that froze the ground solid. He hesitated for a moment, looking at her shaking body. Then he walked closer, careful, and placed the blanket near her feet. Lura gasped and pressed back against the wall, her eyes wide again. But Eli didn't say anything. He just backed away, sat down again, and leaned against the wall. Closing his eyes for a long time, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she reached for the blanket. She pulled it close, wrapping it tightly around her. Her hands touched the rough fabric, still warm from his body. She looked at him, at this strange human who gave food and warmth instead of pain. Her eyes filled with something new, something she didn't understand. The wind howled outside and night began to fall. The city turned silent except for distant thunder. Lura lay down under the blanket, still watching him from the corner of her eye. Eli was already half asleep, his breath slow and calm. He looked older when he slept, tired but peaceful. Lura whispered something in her language, a quiet thank you carried on the cold air. She didn't know if he could hear it, but as she closed her eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, and in that broken city. Among the ghosts of war, a small warmth began, not from fire or machines, but from kindness, the kind that could heal even the deepest scars. As the stars returned to the empty sky, the alien girl slept under a human's blanket, still trembling, but this time not from fear, from something else, something gentle and strange, something like hope. Morning came slowly. The light was weak and gray, slipping through the cracks of broken walls. Ash floated in the air like falling snow, soft but sad. Eli opened his eyes to the cold silence and felt the ache in his body. He turned his head and saw her, the alien girl, still wrapped in his blanket, asleep. Her face was peaceful now, her blue skin glowing faintly under the pale light. For a moment he forgot she was alien. She just looked like a lost child who had finally found a little safety in a world that had none. He sat up, quietly watching her. The war had taught him to be hard, to never trust, to never give more than needed. But something about her, the way she had trembled, the way she had whispered her name, had broken through that armor. He didn't understand why. He only knew that he couldn't leave her here alone. A sharp noise came from outside, metal falling somewhere in the ruins. Eli reached for his old rifle and listened. Only the wind. He waited until he was sure, then stood and looked back at Lura. She stirred, her eyes opening slowly, confused and afraid again. When she saw him, she froze, still holding the blanket like a shield. Eli raised his hand, palm open, showing he meant no harm. "Hey," he said softly. "You're safe." She didn't understand the words, but his tone made her blink instead of run. Her voice came out weak, shaking. "Why? Give?" she asked, pointing at the blanket, her accent heavy. Eli smiled a little. Surprised she tried to speak. "You needed it," he said, even though she couldn't understand. She tilted her head, trying to catch the meaning. Then she looked at the blanket again, touched it carefully, and said something in her language, a sound that almost sounded like thank you. Eli pointed to the broken shelves nearby. He said slowly, "Food." Then he mimed eating. She watched, understanding slowly, and nodded. They began searching together, silent but working like two creatures from different worlds trying to share one small hope. He lifted pieces of metal while she crawled through small gaps. Once she found a half-burnt packet of dried fruit. She held it up proudly, smiling, the first real smile since he met her. Eli couldn't help but grin back. They split the fruit in half, chewing quietly. For the first time since the war, the taste didn't feel empty. When afternoon came, the sun turned red and heavy in the sky. Eli led her to a safer place, an old subway entrance that still had walls strong enough to block the cold wind. They built a small fire using broken furniture. Lura sat near it, watching the flames with wide eyes. She had never seen fire this close before. Her people used energy orbs, clean, blue, and cold. This orange fire looked alive, wild, human. When sparks jumped, she flinched, but Eli laughed quietly and waved his hand over the flame. "Warm," he said, pointing to her hands. She copied him, slowly placing her hands near the fire. A small sigh escaped her lips, and she whispered something that sounded like wonder. Night came fast again. Outside, the wind howled through broken buildings. Eli checked the fire, fed it one last piece of wood, and then sat against the wall. Lura watched him silently, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. She wanted to speak, but she didn't have the right words, so she pointed at him and said softly, "Eli." He nodded. "Yeah." Then she pointed at herself. "Lura," he smiled. "Lura." They said the names again, like two lost children learning the world for the first time. Later she looked at him curiously. Her eyes were sad but curious. "Human. Bad?" she asked slowly. Eli froze, not sure how to answer. He looked into the fire, remembering explosions, screams, burning cities. "Some," he said quietly, "but not all." She didn't understand every word, but his face told her more than language could. She nodded slowly, as if she wanted to believe him. A sudden noise shook the air, a metallic whine, distant but real. Lura jumped, eyes wide. Eli turned off the fire with his boot and grabbed his rifle. Through the cracks he saw small lights moving across the street. Drones. Patrol units from old war machines still active. He signaled her to stay quiet, finger to his lips. They crouched together in the dark, hearts beating fast. The drones scanned the area with red light beams sweeping the walls. Lura pressed against him, shaking again. Eli placed a hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her. "Don't move," he whispered. She could feel his heartbeat through his hand, strong but calm. She looked up at him and saw something strange in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, something softer, something that made her chest ache. The drones passed without seeing them. When the noise faded, they both stayed silent for a while. Then slowly, she looked at him and whispered, "Safe?" He nodded. "Safe." She smiled weakly, her eyes shining in the dim light. Then, without thinking, she pulled the blanket from her shoulders and placed half of it on him. Eli blinked, surprised. She pointed and said one word. Share. He didn't argue. They sat together under the shared blanket. As the city moaned with wind and memory, outside, the stars broke through the black clouds. Eli watched them through the cracked ceiling. He thought of his daughter, how she once looked at the stars the same way. Lura followed his gaze, wondering if somewhere up there her own family still lived. Two worlds, two enemies, sitting side by side under one torn blanket. In that cold and broken night, the line between human and alien blurred. Only warmth remained, only the soft sound of breathing. Only the fragile peace that comes when two lonely souls choose kindness over fear. The next morning came with a pale silver light. Eli woke to the sound of rain tapping against the metal roof. The world outside smelled wet and quiet. He looked around. The small fire had died during the night, but its smoke still hung in the air like a memory. Lura was awake too, sitting near the entrance, hugging the blanket around her, watching the sky as if it held both fear and wonder. She turned when she felt him move. Her eyes looked softer now, less frightened than before for the first time. She didn't pull away when he stepped closer. Eli gave her a small smile, pointing to his bag. Breakfast, he said. Taking out the last 2 cans of food, she tilted her head, not understanding the word but watching carefully as he opened one and handed it to her. She took it slowly, her thin fingers brushing against his hand. The contact made her pause. Humans were warm, much warmer than her kind. It surprised her every time. They ate in silence. The sound of rain, their only music. Eli looked at her, this strange girl who still didn't trust words. He wished he had something to help them talk. Then he remembered, deep in his bag, something old and something from before the war. He pulled out a small square device covered in dust. The light on it blinked weakly when he tapped it. It was a universal translator, once used by soldiers during early peace missions. Lura leaned forward curiously, her eyes wide. What is? She asked softly, pointing to the small metal box. Eli smiled. This, he said, helps us understand. He placed it between them and turned it on. The machine made a soft hum. Then a robotic voice spoke. Calibration. Incomplete. Voice samples required. He looked at her. Say something. She hesitated, then whispered, Lura. The device blinked. Repeating it, Lura, in a flat tone. Eli laughed quietly. Good. Then he said his name. Eli, the device echoed again. Eli. For a moment, the world between them seemed smaller. The device clicked again. Connection unstable. Language pattern corrupted. Eli frowned, tapping the screen. The translator sparked. A small flash and a sharp sound. Lura jumped, frightened. He shook his head. It's okay. But the machine's light flickered and went dim, half dead, half working. The translator began speaking strange words, broken sentences mixing both languages. Lura tilted her head, trying to understand. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time, they could catch pieces of each other's meaning. Eli said slowly. You alone? The device buzzed, repeating in Lura's tongue. You. No people? Her eyes filled with sadness. She nodded. Yes. All gone, she said quietly. The translator turned her soft alien tone into shaky human words. My city. Destroyed everyone. Burned sky. Eli listened, his heart heavy. He thought of his own world. The fires, the screams. The night his daughter disappeared under the bombed stars. He closed his eyes for a second, then asked, Family? Lura looked down. No, she whispered. Me only. Silence filled the room again. The rain outside grew louder. Eli didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and pushed the half of his food can toward her. She looked at it, then at him. Her lips trembled as she said, You kind. He chuckled softly. Don't say that too loud, people might not believe you. The translator buzzed confusedly and repeated, Not loud. People no believe you. Lura blinked. Then laughed, really laughed. For the first time, it was a soft, shy sound. Like music after a long silence, Eli smiled. Feeling warmth he hadn't felt in years, but the moment didn't last long. A sharp noise came from outside. A low whirring like machines moving through the rain. Eli froze, crawling to the entrance. He peeked outside across the street. 3 metallic figures were moving, patrol drones, scanning every ruin with red light. They were old war machines left behind, still following orders from a war that had already ended. If they detected life signs, they would attack without question. Eli turned back, whispering, "Hide," the translator repeated in her tongue. "Hide." Laura didn't hesitate. She grabbed her blanket and slipped behind a pile of rubble. Eli crouched near her, rifle ready but hands shaking. The red lights moved closer, passing through the broken windows like ghosts. One of them stopped near the entrance, its lens turning slowly toward their hiding spot. Eli held his breath. Laura's heart raced. She could hear the mechanical breathing of the drone. It made a clicking sound, scanning. Eli reached for a small stone and threw it across the room. The sound distracted the drone, which turned sharply and moved toward it. The two of them stayed frozen, not even breathing. After what felt like forever, the drones passed, their sound fading into the distance. Only then did Eli lower his weapon. His body shaking with relief, Laura crawled out slowly. Eyes wide, still trembling, she whispered, "Danger? Gone?" He nodded. "Yes," the translator repeated. "Danger finished." She smiled faintly, then reached for the broken translator, turning it in her hands like it was magic. "This, good," she said. Eli laughed. "Yeah, sometimes." The rain began to fade, leaving only dripping sounds from broken metal. They sat close to the small fire again, silent but not uncomfortable. Eli adjusted the translator, trying to fix the connection. It sparked but stayed on, just enough to keep talking. He looked at her and said, "Tomorrow, we move." The translator repeated in her language, "Tomorrow, we go." Laura nodded, understanding enough.
She didn't know where he planned to take her.
But for the first time since her world ended, she trusted someone. As night came, she lay down under the blanket, her hand touching the translator gently like it was a fragile bridge between two lost worlds. And in the fading light of the fire, two voices, human and alien, whispered broken words that somehow felt complete. The world outside was dark again. The wind had changed, colder now, sharper, carrying the smell of ash and burnt metal. Eli and Laura stayed inside the underground shelter they had found. A small room under the old subway tunnels. Water dripped slowly from the ceiling, and the flicker of their weak fire painted shadows on the cracked walls. It wasn't home, but it was safe, and for now. Laura sat quietly, her silver hair falling over her face as she traced strange patterns in the dirt. She was thinking about the translator resting beside her, still blinking weakly. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was enough for a few words, enough to build small bridges between them. Eli was sitting across the fire, cleaning his old rifle with careful hands. His eyes were heavy, filled with thoughts he never spoke. Every now and then he looked at her and then quickly looked away. The translator hummed faintly as Laura broke the silence. "Eli," she said softly. "You fight?" He looked up, surprised. The translator repeated her words with a shaky human tone. "You fight?" Eli stared into the fire for a long time before answering. "Yes," he said. "Long time ago." Laura watched him closely, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "War?" she asked. He nodded. "War." There was pain in his voice, the kind that no machine could translate completely. Laura felt it, even if she didn't understand every word. She reached for the translator and said, "Why? You save me?" The device buzzed and repeated, "Why save?" Eli smiled faintly but without joy. "I don't know," he whispered. "Maybe because someone once saved me too." Laura tilted her head, trying to understand. The translator caught half his words, breaking them apart. "Someone save before." She frowned softly, sensing there was more behind those words. Eli leaned back against the wall, his gaze lost in memory. He saw flashes, the night sky burning, the sound of explosions, the cries that never stopped. And in the middle of it all, a small face, a little girl with brown hair and bright eyes. His daughter, her name was Mira. She was 6 when the war came. He remembered carrying her through fire and smoke. He remembered her voice calling his name. And then, the light, the blast, and silence. When he woke, she was gone, no grave, no goodbye, only the sound of wind moving through ruins. He swallowed hard, pushing the memory down. But Laura was still watching him, her eyes full of quiet curiosity. She didn't know who Mira was, but she could feel the shadow in his heart. "You lost?" she asked softly. The translator repeated, "You lost?" Eli nodded slowly. "Yes, someone I loved." Laura looked down, her hands clutching the blanket tightly. She understood that kind of pain. It was the same one she carried. Her own world was gone too, her family taken by war. Two broken lives sitting together in the dark. After a long silence, Laura stood and began exploring the shelter. Her small footsteps echoed softly. On one wall she noticed something old. Faded drawings made with charcoal. She brushed the dust away and saw human faces. A man, a woman, and a child. The woman's smile was faint. The child's face drawn with care. Eli's hand tightened around his rifle when he saw what she was looking at. He had made those drawings years ago, when loneliness was too heavy and hope was too far. He had drawn them so he wouldn't forget what love looked like. Laura touched the picture of the child and turned to him. "Your family?" she asked. He nodded, unable to speak. The translator buzzed. "Family, gone." Her eyes softened. She stepped closer and placed her hand gently on the wall next to the drawing. "My people too," she said, her voice trembling. "Gone, sky burn, no home." The translator echoed her pain in broken human words. Eli looked at her, not as an alien anymore, but as someone who had lost everything too, and for the first time. They didn't need the translator to understand each other. The firelight flickered, casting their shadows together on the wall, human and alien. Side by side, Eli spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I thought helping you would make the ghosts quiet." Laura didn't understand the words, but she felt the sorrow behind them, so she reached out, her small hand touching his arm. "Ghosts, no angry," she said softly. "They see, you kind?" Eli looked at her, surprised by the simple words. For a moment his chest felt lighter. Maybe she was right. Then the quiet was broken. A sharp crack echoed through the tunnels, metal bending. Something heavy falling. Eli stood instantly. Grabbing his weapon, Laura backed away. Fear returning to her eyes, the sound came again. Closer now, followed by mechanical clicking. He signaled her to stay behind him. From the darkness at the far end of the tunnel, a red light appeared. Scanning the air, Eli cursed under his breath. A patrol drone, old, damaged, but still deadly. Its sensors blinked as it locked onto their movement. Eli raised his rifle. The drone spoke in a cold voice. "Unauthorized life detected." "Eliminate," Laura gasped, covering her mouth. The drone fired, a thin beam of light cutting through the wall. Eli pushed her down just in time. He rolled behind a column, aimed carefully, and fired back. The bullet hit the drone's eye. Sparks flew. It screamed with static and crashed into the wall. Burning. The smell of smoke filled the shelter. Laura crawled to his side. Coughing, he smiled weakly, lowering his weapon. "Close one," he muttered. She didn't know what that meant, but she smiled anyway. Her hand touched his shoulder. Checking if he was hurt, he shook his head. Then, as the firelight flickered again, she noticed something carved on his wrist. A small name. "Mira," she read slowly, the translator repeating the word. She looked up at him, eyes wide with understanding. Eli froze. For the first time she saw all of him. Not just a human, not just a survivor, but a father who had lost everything. And in that silent moment, their hearts understood something no war could destroy. That pain could connect where words could not. That kindness could exist even after the end of the world. And that sometimes saving someone else was the only way to save yourself. The next day the wind carried danger, even before the sun rose. Eli felt it, that strange stillness that always came before trouble. He sat by the tunnel entrance, scanning the gray sky through broken glass. The air smelled of metal and fuel somewhere far away. Engines roared. He knew what it meant, searchers. They were not human, not alien, but machines made by both. Old war patrols reprogrammed to hunt survivors. They didn't care who they found, human or alien, if something moved. It was marked as a threat. Laura sat behind him, wrapping the blanket tighter around her small shoulders. Her silver eyes watched him with worry. She had learned enough human words to understand danger. "Bad coming?" she asked softly. Eli nodded, his hand tightening around his rifle. "Yes," he said quietly. "Bad?" the translator buzzed faintly, repeating. "Bad come." The ground trembled as the sound grew louder. Eli peeked through a crack in the wall and saw them. 3 search drones moving down the street like beasts sniffing for blood. Their red sensors cut through the fog. They were close, too close. Laura gasped and pressed herself against the wall. Her heart was beating fast. "Eli," she whispered, "we go?" He shook his head. They'll see us, he said, voice low. We stay quiet, but it was already too late. The smallest drone turned its sensor toward the tunnel entrance. A red beam swept across the ground, scanning movement. Laura froze. Eli grabbed her hand, whispering, "Run!" They sprinted through the dark tunnels, their footsteps echoing off the stone. The translator clattered in Laura's hand, blinking weakly as it tried to keep up with their words. Behind them, the drones screeched, their metal limbs scraping against the floor as they followed. Blue sparks lit up the darkness. The tunnel shook with every blast. Faster, Eli shouted, pulling her along. Laura stumbled but didn't let go. Her lungs burned and her legs trembled. She had never run this far before. But the fear in her chest was stronger than pain. The sound of gunfire filled the air. Chunks of wall exploded beside them. Showering dust and fire, they turned sharply. Ducking into an old maintenance room, Eli slammed the heavy door behind them, locking it with a metal bar. Silence. Only the echo of their breathing remained. Laura fell to her knees, clutching her chest. Her small body shook as she gasped for air. Eli knelt beside her, checking for wounds. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded weakly, tears in her eyes. The translator buzzed. "I'm fine. Thank you." Eli smiled softly, brushing dust from her hair. "You're tougher than you look," he said. She didn't understand every word, but she understood his smile, and it made her heart beat a little calmer. Then a loud metallic thud echoed from outside. The drones were at the door. Eli's smile faded. He checked his rifle. 3 bullets left, not enough. He looked around the small room. Broken pipes, rusted tanks, nothing useful. He cursed under his breath. Laura stood beside him, her eyes wide with fear. The translator blinked between them, flickering light across their faces. "Eli," she said quietly, "hide?" He shook his head. "No time." The door shook violently. Metal bending. The drones were breaking through. Eli aimed at the door, ready to shoot. Laura looked at him, really looked, and saw something strange in his eyes. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for her, and she realized what he meant to do. "No," she said quickly. Grabbing his arm, her voice cracked. "No die." Eli gave her a sad smile. "I'm not dying," he said. "I'm buying time." The translator struggled to repeat his words, breaking them apart. "No die. Buy time." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered. "No leave." He reached into his pocket and handed her something, a small data chip, covered in scratches. "Take this," he said. "Go to the end of the tunnel, find the lift, climb out. Keep moving north." The translator translated his orders in her tongue. She stared at the chip, confused and trembling. "What is?" she asked. Eli looked at her one last time. "My daughter," he said softly. "Her voice is in there." The door cracked open, metal screaming. Red light poured into the room like blood. Eli stood, raising his weapon. "Go," he shouted. The translator screamed the same word in her language. "Go." Laura hesitated, then turned and ran, clutching the chip in one hand and the blanket in the other. She heard the shots behind her. 1, 2, 3, then a loud crash and silence. Tears blurred her vision as she ran through the tunnels. Her heart felt like it was breaking with every step. She wanted to stop, to turn back, but she couldn't. Eli's voice echoed in her head. "Keep moving north." She climbed the old ladder, her hands bleeding as she pushed herself upward. The tunnel opened into light. Cold air hit her face. She crawled out. Gasping, behind her a distant explosion shook the ground. She turned and saw smoke rising from the tunnel entrance. Her eyes filled with tears, she whispered his name, Eli. The translator in her hand blinked once, twice, and then spoke in his voice. A recording, his last words. "If you hear this," the voice said, "you made it." "Don't stop." "Live, Laura. Live for both of us," her knees gave out. She pressed the translator to her chest, sobbing softly. The sky above was gray, heavy with ash, but somewhere beyond those clouds, she felt the warmth of his kindness, the man who gave her food, his blanket, and his life. The human who became more than a story, he became her reason to survive. And as she looked north toward the unknown, she whispered through her tears, "I will live. Eli, I promise." The world was quiet after the blast. Only the wind moved, carrying the smell of burned metal and smoke through the ruins. Laura lay on the ground, her hand still covering her ears, her heart pounding like a drum. When she opened her eyes, the sky was gray and heavy. She could taste dust on her tongue. Her whole body trembled, not from the cold, from the truth. Eli was gone. She sat up slowly, staring at the tunnel behind her, now collapsed under black smoke and fire. Her fingers clutched the translator and the small data chip he had given her. She pressed them to her chest, whispering his name again and again. Eli, Eli. The translator blinked weakly, his voice echoing faintly. Keep moving north. She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her face. I can't, she whispered. Not without you. But even as she said it, she heard his voice again, not from the translator, but from her memory, Live Laura. And so, with shaking legs, she stood. The city stretched before her like a graveyard of steel and stone. Shattered towers, broken roads, and the distant sound of machines moving through the ruins. Laura wrapped the torn blanket around herself and began walking. Each step felt heavy. She was alone again, but this time, she carried a part of someone who had believed in her. Hours passed. The sun never fully broke through the clouds. She followed the sound of running water until she found a cracked river. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the ruins like a ghost. She knelt down to drink, but the reflection made her stop. Her face, dirty, tired, and yet stronger, stared back. She didn't recognize herself anymore. Not the frightened alien girl from the market. Not the trembling survivor under a human's blanket. This one had seen mercy. This one had learned courage. A soft mechanical hum broke her thoughts. Laura turned sharply, her heart skipping. 3 drones hovered in the distance, searching. Their red lights swept across the ruins like hungry eyes. She ducked behind a fallen pillar. Clutching the translator tight, the sound grew closer. One drone stopped near the river. Scanning the air, its sensors beeped. Laura held her breath. Then a faint human voice came from the translator. Eli's last recording still playing on loop. Live, Laura. Live. The sound echoed through the air. The drone turned instantly toward her hiding spot. Its red beam flashing bright, she gasped, covering the device. But it was too late. The drone fired. A bolt of energy slicing through the stone near her head. Laura screamed and ran. The air filled with light and smoke as blasts tore through the ruins behind her. Her feet slipped on wet ground. Her lungs burned. She dove into a narrow alley, clutching her blanket and the translator like lifelines. The drone followed, its metal limbs scraping. It fired again. The blast hit her arm. Pain seared through her body. She fell hard, the translator sliding from her hand. Blood ran down her sleeve, warm and sticky. The drone hovered closer, its red light scanning her face. Target identified. Alien threat, it said in a flat voice. Laura looked up, shaking, her vision blurred. She reached for a small piece of broken glass beside her, the same kind she once used to defend herself when she first met Eli. But her strength was fading. The drone raised its weapon. Then something strange happened. The translator, lying in the dirt, flickered again. Eli's voice spoke, louder this time. Mercy, Laura. Remember Mercy? The drone's sensors glitched for a second, confused by the human voice. Laura used that moment to crawl forward and slam the broken glass into its eye. Sparks exploded. The drone spun wildly, firing in random directions before collapsing to the ground. Laura fell beside it, gasping for air. Her wounded arm trembled as she reached for the translator again. It was cracked now, its light fading. But still, it whispered his voice. You did good. She closed her eyes, whispering back, No. You did. Then she looked at the destroyed drone. Its red light flickered weakly. Inside the machine's body, she saw a familiar logo, the mark of the Human Defense Unit. Her heart sank. Eli's people had built these machines. They had once protected humans from aliens like her. Now they hunted everything. She stared at the mark for a long time, then whispered, You saved one of your enemies, Eli. Even when your world hated mine. The sky rumbled. Thunder. Rain began to fall again, cold and heavy, washing the blood from her arm. She tore a piece of her blanket and wrapped the wound tightly. The pain was sharp, but it kept her awake. She picked up the data chip again, holding it close to her heart. I'll keep your promise, she said softly. Then she looked toward the north, toward the horizon where the clouds broke slightly. A faint light shone through. Hope. She started walking, step by slow step. Through the rain as she walked, she noticed something. Far ahead, a weak light flickering through the mist. A campfire, someone else was alive. Her heart jumped. Maybe other survivors. Maybe help or maybe danger. She hesitated, clutching the translator tightly. Eli's voice echoed in her head again, calm and steady. Don't be afraid of life, Lura. So she took a deep breath and walked toward the light, each step echoing softly in the quiet world, each drop of rain whispering against the earth like his voice. And as she reached the edge of the broken street, the firelight revealed a shadow, a figure standing still. Waiting, Lura froze, her heart beat faster. For a moment, she thought she saw him, the same coat, the same shape. But when the wind blew, the figure turned. It wasn't Eli, it was someone else, someone watching her with cautious eyes. And in that silent second between fear and hope, Lura realized her journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. The firelight flickered weakly against the wet ruins. Lura stood at the edge of the broken street, her heart pounding as the shadow moved closer. Rain ran down her face, dripping from her hair and soaking the old blanket she carried. The figure stepped into the light, a tall woman in dark armor, silver marks running down her face like tears. Her eyes glowed the same pale blue as Lura's. Alien but older, stronger. Lura froze, unable to speak. The woman lowered her weapon slowly. You survived, she said in their language. Her voice rough but full of disbelief. Lura blinked. You, from home? She whispered. The woman nodded. I am Commander Syra of the 3rd Moon Fleet, she said. We've been searching for survivors since the fall. Lura's breath caught in her chest. She wasn't alone anymore. Tears filled her eyes as she stepped forward. I thought, all gone, she whispered. Syra looked at her, at the dirt, the blood. The torn blanket wrapped around her. You are hurt, she said. Come. We will take you to the ship, Lura hesitated, glancing north where the dark clouds broke just enough for a faint light to shine through. In her hand, the cracked translator blinked weakly. Eli's voice echoed once more. Keep moving north. Live, Lura. She looked back at the commander, confusion in her eyes. Ship? She asked quietly. Yes, Syra said. Our transport is waiting beyond the ridge. Then her voice softened. You are safe now, safe. The word felt strange in her ears. For weeks she had dreamed of hearing it, but now that it was real, it didn't feel like she expected. Lura held the translator close, listening again to the faint voice. Eli's voice, fading like the last light of a dying star. Her heart twisted, she whispered softly. I promise, Syra frowned. What promise? Lura looked up, her eyes shining in the rain. To a human, she said. He saved me, gave me food, his blanket, his life. Syra stiffened, the blue glow in her eyes hardening. A human, she said sharply. You lived with one of them. Lura nodded, her grip tightening on the translator. He was good, she said. He was kind. Syra's face darkened. They are not kind, child, she said. They killed our cities, burned our worlds. You forget what they did? Lura's voice trembled. I did not forget. But I saw one who was different, she pointed to the horizon, where the smoke from the collapsed tunnel still rose faintly. He saved me when no one else would. Syra shook her head. He used you like they always do. Lura stepped back, shaking her head. No, she said softly. He gave everything. Her voice cracked with emotion. He died to save me. The commander's face softened for a moment, but her tone stayed cold. We cannot change what they are. Child, she said. Come before more of their machines find us. Lura looked at the blanket, still carrying the faint scent of smoke and warmth. Her fingers traced its rough edges. Every thread felt like his memory. Eli's laughter, his pain, his quiet eyes. He had taught her what mercy meant, and now she had to decide what to do with it. The sky roared as thunder rolled across the ruins far away. The deep hum of engines echoed. Alien warships descending through the clouds. Syra looked up, her comm device flashing. They are here, she said. Our people will reclaim this world, Lura's heart sank. Reclaim? She whispered. Yes, Syra said. We will erase what's left of them, every machine. Every human, Lura's eyes widened. No, she said quickly. There are still good ones. Syra's gaze turned hard again. There are none worth saving. The words struck Lura like a knife. She remembered Eli's broken hands, his gentle smile, the way he gave her food instead of taking it. Her voice shook as she said, Then you are no better than them? Syra's expression turned to shock. Then anger. Careful, child, she warned. You speak treason. Lura stood tall, her small figure trembling but firm. If mercy is treason, she said, then I will not be loyal. The wind howled, lightning flashed across the clouds. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Syra sighed heavily. "You've changed," she said quietly. "You sound like him." Lura smiled faintly. "I hope so." The older woman looked at her, the rain falling harder now. "You must choose, Lura," she said softly. "Come with us, live with your people again, or stay here among the ghosts of humans." Lura looked at the horizon, the north, the direction Eli had told her to follow. Her hands tightened around the translator and the data chip. She could almost hear his voice again. "Choose the light, even when it hurts." She took a deep breath, tears mixing with the rain. Then she turned to Syra. "I will not help destroy them," she said quietly. Syra's eyes filled with disappointment. "Then you will die with them," she said, turning away. Lura watched as the commander disappeared into the rain. The sound of ships grew louder, engines roaring like thunder. She looked down at the translator one last time, its light fading completely. "Goodbye, Eli," she whispered. "You showed me who I want to be." Then she walked toward the ridge, away from the city, alone again, but no longer afraid. Every step she took left a mark on the wet earth, and behind her the war began again, but this time, something new had been born. Something small and fragile. A seed of mercy in a world that had forgotten what it meant. As the first beams of dawn broke through the clouds, Lura looked to the light and whispered softly, "For you, Eli, I will live." And for the first time since the war, the wind carried something other than smoke. It carried hope.